Louis Riddick will be on the main set for the NFL Draft on ESPN once again. Mike Greenberg and Booger McFarland. They'll be from Cleveland. ESPN and ABC will both televise the draft all 3 days, April 29th through May 1st, as we bring in the former defensive back and former NFL Pro Scout Director of Pro Personnel. Louis, let me hit you with the poll question. Let's take out Trevor Lawrence. The guy that you say can't miss in the first 10 picks is who?
I'm going to say it's Jamar Chase. Look, I just think, you got to remember back in 2019 when this young man was 19 years old. He put together one of the greatest seasons you'll ever see a wide receiver put together. And it wasn't simply because LSU was better than everyone else. It wasn't simply because Joe Burrow wound up being the number one overall pick. It was because this guy torched every single SEC defensive back he went up against, and many of them were very good players who wound up getting drafted high in the NFL. And when you look at how he's constructed as far as his body type, I mean, the guy is rock solid. I mean, he's a monster, and he's fast, and he doesn't drop passes. He runs great routes. He can run inside. He can run outside. He can run deep. He can run short. He can run after the catch. He can beat you in 50-50 balls. I don't know what else really you want him to do. And he's just hyper competitive. So, I mean, I think whoever takes him is instantly getting a 1,200, 1,300-yard receiver.
Where do you stand on the best tight end in the league going into the draft or the best offensive lineman? If I said you could have Kyle Pitts or Penei Sewell, and both are going to work out, but the priority of getting a great tight end or a great offensive lineman?
Well, I think in the context of team building, Dan, I'm always going to go inside out. I'm always going to build the team front to back. So I'm going to make sure I take care of the people who are throwing the football to those guys who are pretty catching the ball on the outside. And that's why when the conversation comes up about Cincinnati, or, well, I'm really not about Atlanta because Atlanta's not in the market for a tackle. But when the conversation comes up for Cincinnati, that's why I'm always going to defer to either Penei Sewell or Rashawn Slater in order to protect Joe Burrow. You just can't. You can't get by without it. And look, and I think in a small way, although it was a big game on a great stage, we learned that in the Super Bowl this past year.
Yeah, I just brought that up. I agree.
And for you to ignore that, you're just kind of like defying what the football gods have always told you, is you better take care of your lines. I know it doesn't sound – it's not fun because, Kyle Pitts is probably going to do some damage on somebody's fantasy team next year. But that's not the point. These two young tackles, Sewell and Slater – and or guards, wherever you want to play them, are going to be Pro Bowlers and probably going to be all pros very quickly.
You have Atlanta at 4, and there's sort of the mystery team here. If somebody going to trade out, are they going to take a quarterback? You're going to take Kyle Pitts? Let's say you're running the Falcons.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know right now, draft is tonight, and you know who's going 1, 2. Well, you sort of know who's going 1, 2, and 3. Do you think Mac Jones is going 3?
I do until the data, or rather the information that's coming in says otherwise. And look, the information that we're primarily getting from people who are dialed in and tapped into the people who are making those decisions in a way that we know history has proven that these guys are rarely wrong. All right. So it makes sense to me as to why they would go Mac Jones. And I've talked about this a lot, about quarterback play is just not about physical traits. When we get on shows like this, Dan, and we've talked, and you've talked to many people about this, what happens usually, what is the reason why people usually bust out of the league, especially a quarterback? It's not because, well, that guy just didn't have enough arm strength. That guy just couldn't create enough plays off. That's not why. It's because something happened upstairs in his mind, whether it be the way he played the game on the field from an intelligent perspective or the way he took care of himself off the field. That's usually what happens. It's something as far as the way they're wired. No one has any issues. As a matter of fact, everyone is lauding Mac Jones for the way he's wired. Some great quarterback coaches and offensive coordinators are praising him for that. And Kyle and whoever else is advising him, whether it be his father, Mike, or whoever, they know this too. So it wouldn't shock me if they take him. Now, at the same time, I heard people over the weekend talking about the fact that Trey Lance could sway them today with his pro day. Trey Lance swayed me from the very first time I talked to him, and then I watched him on his first pro day. Don't discount him. I understand his resume isn't as long. Look, I think everything is on the table for them. I really do. But when people as connected as Adam Schefter say what they say, And then he continues to say, until I hear information otherwise, this is where I'm going with it, then I'm going with it.
Okay, so if you're Atlanta, you're running Atlanta, you're on the
Yeah.
clock. Let's say Mac Jones has just been selected and the Atlanta Falcons select.
You know what? Actually, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to trade down. That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay,
I'm trying to trade down.
you can't trade down.
I know. So now you're saying, do I pick a player, right? All right. Look, I'm one of those people who likes to think about the long term. Really, okay. Let me just tell you what my thought process is. First of all, the very first thing I need in Atlanta is defense. But I can't get value at 4. I can't. That's why I said I want to trade down. Second, okay, now what do I want? Do I want to think about the long term as far as making sure I have an heir apparent to Matt Ryan? Or do I need something right now in the short term to appease my head coach who says Matt Ryan can play for 3 or 4 more years? And maybe address my quarterback position somewhere down the line.
You're running out of time with your draft
pick
here.
I'm probably going to turn in the card for Kyle Pitts. That's what I'm going to do.
I agree with you. Atlanta's problems are defensively but you can't. I don't know of who's going to trade up, and then what do you get when you trade back down there?
Yeah, you don't want to go too far if you're Atlanta. You don't want to get out of the mix. You don't want to get out of the. Maybe somebody wants to come up there and somebody wants to grab either Trey Lance or Justin Fields or whoever it is at that point in time. That's what you're banking on. We've heard that Denver could possibly be a mover, although there are people who have said they have not called Atlanta to move up to 4 yet. That's what I'm hoping, though. I'll tell you this. I'm going to wait until the very last second to turn in that card. I'm going to hope my phone rings. That's what I'm doing.
He's Louis Riddick from the Mothership. Anything in the profile in Sports Illustrated on Trevor Lawrence concern you?
There was a lot of brouhaha over what I said late last week about this. It caught my attention, Dan.
Okay.
All right? It caught my attention because when we're talking about quarterbacks, who are going to be drafted number 1 overall, I know Trevor said he loves the game and he wants to be the best ever to play it. I know. Okay? And I know he says he doesn't have a chip on his shoulder. That's great. I never said anything about that. But I will say this. Quarterbacks in the NFL, coaches in the NFL will tell you the game is much harder at the NFL level and requires a different level of preparation and a different mindset than whatever you had when you were in college. It's that, and we know this, and I know this as a player. It's totally different. So it made me think, okay, well, I know he's gotten by with everything that he's done. The way he's done it so far, he's been the best on the field every time he stepped on the field, except for maybe when they played Ohio State, and Justin Fields is the best on the field. But, I'm just interested to see what his approach is and how he talks about the game once he gets to Jacksonville and things aren't as easy for him as they were at Clemson. I'm interested to hear how he talks about the game then, and as far as his preparation and what his mindset is, or doesn't it change? Or does he remain the same person and just say, hey, look, I'm still not driven by Super Bowls. I'm not driven by accolades. That's just not who I am. Does he remain that guy? And if he does, great. But the expectations are going to be much different for him in Jacksonville than they ever were at even Clemson, because he's the number 1 pick in the draft. And the last thing I said about that was this. If other players in the NFL, whether it be quarterback or otherwise, had even intimated in any way that football wasn't the number 1 thing that on their priority list, and they weren't driven maniacally to be the best they could possibly be, we would have discussions about it. But for Trevor, all of a sudden, it's like it's not allowed. You can't say anything about him. Look at what he's done. And it wasn't me. I wasn't trying to disparage the guy, and I wasn't trying to criticize him. I was just raising the question of, okay, well, how would we react to other people had they said this kind of thing, or people around them who know them very well had said this kind of thing?
But the
game is different.
This is the first time he's been critiqued nationally. Right. On the field or off the field. But it's not a coincidence, though, Louis, that you look at some of the great quarterbacks of all time, and they have a chip on their shoulder. Montana taken in the 3rd round. Marino went all the way at the end of the 1st round. Aaron Rodgers all the way at the 1st round. Mahomes got passed up. Drew Brees got passed up. Go down the list. I mean, Peyton was not, he was taken number 1 overall. Right. Unless he says, well, I should have won the Heisman. You create a chip if you don't have a chip. Lord knows Brady certainly is still working on that chip.
Sure.
But I don't think it's a coincidence that these guys who have been successful, had a chip on their shoulder.
Sure. look, I think again, and it's interesting. It's interesting that a lot of the conversation surrounding the draft is about Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. The guy who articulated it in the most real way from a coaching perspective to me about what they thought really built the kind of culture that's a winning, sustainable culture in the NFL was Kyle Shanahan. And he said this, when we were talking to him in Monday Night Football production meetings, he said, once you get enough guys who realize how hard this game is and really kind of intrinsically the number one thing that they need is this game. This game is everything to them, and they're willing to give everything they possibly can to it. And you have enough of those guys who kind of buy into that kind of culture. That's when you're able to do real special things. And he loved the culture of his football team because of that, because it was that way. And he said he himself was that way. And he figured that out, during the pandemic last year, where for the first couple of weeks, he said it was cool that, he could play some golf and he would be around his family and all that. He said, but over time, it was like, I need this game. I need to be around the guys. I need to be coaching. I need to be game planning because that's who I am and that's what I want to do. And all those guys who you talk about, and you're right, all the greats who we all love and we all revere, they had that maniacal passion and love for the game to where nothing stood in their way when it came to trying to be one of the greats of all time. And that all I was saying was that's what's going to be expected of Trevor, both because he's going number one overall and because every step of the way, that's what's happened to him. He's been the best guy on the field. Well, now he's not going to necessarily be the best guy on the field anymore. There's going to be plenty of guys, and there's going to be plenty of teams they go up against that they're going to feel like Wake Forest. They're going to feel like Boston College against Clemson, and they're going to feel like, okay, we still have a little bit of a ways to go to build out our program. Now, how are you going to respond to that? And how are you going to motivate everyone else around that? And you know what? I'm going to bet on the fact that he's going to anyway, simply because the guy is special. I believe the guy is special. It was just surprising to hear someone be so honest about something like that in a day and age where, this game is hard, man. It's just hard at the NFL level. It's very different. And I know that firsthand. It's different.
See, I was more concerned that he said it, not that he thought it, that he said it.
Yeah. You know what? It takes... there's plenty of people who also at the same time, Dan, were like praising him for saying it, that it reflected awareness and maturity and comfort in his own skin. And maybe it does.
Wait a minute. If Zach Wilson said, let's say Sam Darnold came out and said that.
Oh, well, that was my point.
We would crush Sam Darnold if he said
that was exactly my point. We would apply a different standard to those individuals and say, hey, wait a second. Oh, red flag here, red flag, Of course we would. Of course we would.
Great to talk to you, and hopefully we'll talk to you before we get to the draft. But thanks again for joining us, Louis.
Of course, anytime, man.
That's Louis Riddick, ESPN Fun Day Night. It's Fun Day Night. It's Monday Night Football, and former NFL player, former pro scout, director of pro personnel.